Welcome to the Made for Agriculture podcast. Today's hosts are Adam Jones and Cameron Horine.
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones.
And I'm Cameron Horine.
And hey, straight from our traveling compadre, Cameron Horine. Welcome, Cameron. Glad you're on here this morning.
Yep, glad I could be.
Awesome. So we're diving into fall. We've got kind of our last in-season update on crop conditions when we're really kind of talking our two main crops for the region, corn and soybeans. If it tells you anything about the weather outside, you can take a look at what these guys are wearing this morning. I see a kind of a light hoodie shirt, and I also see some flannel, which is awesome. That shows the kind of the turnaround in weather conditions that we've had. It's I know 52 degrees outside my door this morning. So on August 25th, we'll take it. Anyway, I know there's a lot of stuff going on, end of season stuff, maybe not things that we can actually pull the trigger for anymore, or maybe there are some things like that. But these guys got some good updates, some things that we should at least be scouting for and learning from out in the field right now. So we'll kick it over to Mr. Craig Russell and let him start with a crop update from the north. Morning, Craig.
Morning. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'll kind of start things off by talking about corn a little bit. A lot of our corn now, milk lines halfway down the kernels or further on a lot of this earlier planted corn. We're looking at, should have some corn that's black layered in another week or two anyway. Later planted corn, there's some of that maybe that's just now getting to dent stage, but at this point, fungicide season's pretty well wrapped up. You're not gonna need to make any of those applications to protect from foliar diseases or anything at this point. Those just aren't necessarily economically feasible. A lot of our consultants now they're taking a look at those fields, kind of checking for stalk integrity. If there's any stalk rots out there, which we've seen some, I don't know that it's been necessarily just a huge concern, but taking a look at that crop to see how's it going to stand as we get into harvest here, and are there some of those fields that we maybe need to prioritize on trying to get them out. We had quite a bit of rain this year, so there's some fields that probably a little bit short on nitrogen, and then with the disease as well, kind of worried about some of these fields having those plants or maybe cannibalize that stalk a little bit to finish out grain fill, so that's going to have an impact on stalk integrity. Just be aware, kind of have a plan going into harvest. Even if some of those fields aren't maybe the first ones you pull out, they definitely don't want to make them necessarily your last ones. Soybeans we're basically right there towards the end of pod fill on a lot of them. Even your later planted soybeans have started seed development now. Some of the earlier planted ones that we've got some beans that have made it to R6. There's seeing some pretty good defoliation in some of the double crop beans. I know that's just mostly from kind of army worms, I think, really. And we've had some other defoliating insects like clover worms, I know, that have kind of finding in some pretty good densities and causing some good defoliation where we've needed to get out there and treat for those. So that's a little bit of a watch out. Otherwise, I think for the most part, a lot of the soybean crops kind of wrapping up, and really foliar diseases have stayed pretty mild this year in that way. Mostly just septoria and downy mildew kind of in that canopy when you're looking at some of that. I was going to kind of talk just a little bit about earlier this week. I kind of worked with a customer, and he had some pretty good lodging in his soybeans, and it's kind of the time of year where you start to see some of that as well. Kind of the first couple things you need to look at for that would be like your planting population and variety. But if those are good and in check, be thinking about taking a look at some of your soil fertility. I know in this particular instance, potash, his potassium levels in the soil were pretty low, and fertilizer market being what it is, some of those inputs are going to be pretty high next year, but that potassium has a crucial role in the plant as far as lignin production. So if you don't have that nutrient there, those soybeans are going to be a lot more likely to to fall over, and everybody's going to get into harvest. And if we've got some down soybeans, I know there's some that are pretty tall out there this year that hit me on the chest, and I'm 6'4", so if those are falling over, may need to take a look at some soil fertility and go that route there too. So, but that's kind of what I got for up here, I guess, for most of the year.
Yeah, it's a good call out, Craig. And I don't know if the rest of you guys have comments on this. Feel free to chime in too. We had a little so actually, my team, we had a plot tour and kind of looking at soybean varieties for next year on Friday. We had a discussion in the plot about this, about taking a look at soybeans and folks's, kind of lack of desire to have them get a little bit lazy. I think we're going to continue to see as guys are pushing planting date, into those earlier soybeans. A lot of some of these varieties were designed maybe not necessarily to have that long of a growing season. I mean, those early soybeans get really, really big on us. And so I think really plant height, when you're looking at varieties, is going to be something that you need to consider as well. When you get that plant out there that long during all those growing conditions, you can really bump that kind of internodal length and on some of those varieties, and they get big, they get long and lanky. So something we ought to look at, especially if we're going to stick them in the ground the first week of April. So also keep in mind when you're looking at plots and plot data, nearly all of those plots are in 30-inch rows, and you're going to bump the population and plant them on 15s. So that makes them longer as well. So, when you look at a bean that may stand in 30-inch rows, it may not in 15s. So that's something to think about as well. But that's a good call out, Craig, because there's a lot of super long beans that are getting a little bit lazy out there this time of year. So, okay, Jesse, you're going to have to unmute, but I'm just going to go ahead and kick it over to you.
Oh, okay. Well, I was trying to be kind, so background noise wasn't there. I mean, you got to think we're raising better beans, though, by 10 bushel from 10 years ago. That's a lot of weight on a bean. And I don't know that the genetic guys have 100% got that figured out yet. We're raising more yield, but we ain't raising the stalk integrity like we probably need to. Because, I mean, some of our early planted beans are, a matter of fact, there were some 3/8 that were planted the same time we planted some 4/8, and they were gramoxone and cut last week. But our 4/8 in the last 2 weeks looks like they've shrunk 8-10 inches just because of the weight of all putting on the pods. And we had some heavy winds come through, and I mean, it kind of tossed them around, but they stood better than what I think. But unlike you, Craig, I'm 5'7", and they're as tall as me. So it's by far the biggest we've had. But that's just what I've noticed since we started raising better beans. They're always leaning and falling past 5-6 years.
That's a good call out too, Jesse. I mean, that's a lot of weight on a plant to hold up too. So
I think we have to remember as well, when we're talking about our soybeans, is the different types of soybeans with the indeterminate and determinate. A lot of our trade territory that we're talking about is they start flowering. There's still a lot of growth that's going to happen on those beans because most of our beans are indeterminate, and so they're going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to put on leaf mass, and so as we continue to plant those earlier, as you mentioned, Jones, it's just those indeterminate beans, the type of beans that we have. There's going to be a lot of weight mass that gets added on, even after they start flowering. So you got pods and all those extra leaves, the trifoliates, that has a big impact.
absolutely it does. Absolutely it does, for sure. And we get some changes in, disease pressure, you get deck T stem borer or something like that. And, those will knock them over. So yeah, you got a lot of things going on out there that can cause some of that. But if it affects your harvestability of your soybean crop, then it's something definitely there's a lot of varietal difference is what I will say. So it's definitely something you need to be looking at.
Yeah, and I do think Craig brought up a very critical point, is the fertilizer. We've always, it's got better over the years, but we've always really focused on fertilizer on corn, and that has been our cash crop. But as we continue to push yields on soybeans, having that potash to replace what we're pulling out of these soybean fields, instead of averaging 40, 45 bushel soybeans. Now we're 50, 60 bushel soybeans, right? In most areas, especially these last few years with the weather that we've had. We pulled a lot more nutrients out of the field than what we have the previous 3 or 4, especially like in Shannon's area where we've had drought conditions and stuff. So being conscious of that, I know the farm gate's tight and I know fertilizer prices are tight, but just being conscious of what we've done in the last 2 years with weather conditions as well.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the reason I brought that up too, I mean, kind of going back into this, but I mean, I know Scott had talked about seeing a lot of potassium deficiency kind of earlier on in the season, and I just, I don't necessarily, with the markets being what they are, I mean, I just want guys to be conscious of, you're going to have to replace what you're taking off, and we've got some pretty good tools for that with NutriTrack. I mean, using yield data to put nutrients back where we're taking them off, but just need to be responsible with that fertilizer as much as ever. So
Absolutely agree. And yeah, I would echo what Scott's seeing out there. You can still, see a lot of potash deficiency right now. So, okay, Jesse, what else is going on down there?
I guess I'll just give a little bit of harvest. Like I said, there's been some early beans cut last week. Go to the further south of our territory, they've been showing corn for a week. And then like you get up to the middle section, some guys tried it last week, but it's still running 27, 28. But I'd say this week it'll be, the guys who always cut early will be full throttle. And then I'd say by the 5th September, it'll be full throttle across the whole territory. So a lot of corn. And there's just still the corn coming to black layer. It's just, we've been up till, I guess, last Wednesday, this cool off kind of moved in. We were in the 90s with no rain. So this corn went downhill fast. We kind of talked earlier about diseases, and you can tell it's been 45, 50 days since we had our fungicide timing, because in the past 10 days, this corn just got hammered with everything. And I'm not going to say one's worse than the other. Just when it come in hard. There's a lot of this corn that went from, between the heat, disease, run out of nitrogen, everything, it went from being green as a gourd to be totally brown in about 10 days. So just, the fungicide done what it was supposed to do. You can't be mad at it, but when you mix everything together, that's just kind of what happens. So kind of keep that in mind when you're looking. A lot of this heavy ground corn, the gumbo, you can tell when it got dry, a lot of this corn's just giving up. I'll just say it that way. I mean, it's time for it to give up. It's not wanting to hold on between the stress early, the heat, disease. It's done. We've got some later planting corn, but even it's probably half milk line or later. And at this point in time, if you ain't fungicided it for southern rust, you're just going to have to deal with what it's going to be, and you're going to take a pretty good hit. Beans, we still got a lot of beans that are R4. Still got a lot of frog eye coming in. Just make sure you're looking at your beans or talking to your consultants, because they're probably making recs for fungicide. I know on this late planted beans, nobody wants the fungicide, because that means they might not get cut to November, but you can either gain a few bushel, cut them in November, or not and cut them in October. That's the way we've been putting it. I don't want to force nobody's hands, but that's just where we are. And then I don't know if Scott will talk about armyworms and podworms. We ain't got them across the whole territory, but they are moving further north, and we're just catching them in pockets, spraying them when we need to. We're still kind of sticking with the besiege, playing with the rate depending on the stage of beans, and kind of driving on from that. It's slowed down quite a bit in the last week, 10 days.
Yep, sounds good. No, appreciate that, Jesse. It's a good call out. The corn thing there's not much you can you can do things, but economically it doesn't make a lot of sense in a crop this late of stage. But it's a good time to get out there, because there's a lot of differences in hybrids. There's differences in fungicide that was put on. You can just drive up and down the road and look at corn, and you go from one that's super green still to the next one that's rust colored. That heavy rust corn is doing just what you said, Jesse. It's giving up quicker than the green corn is. I think we'll see that in test weight when we get to harvest. 100%. So there's varietal different. I mean, there's hybrid differences in southern rust tolerance this year that you can see. We me being, 2 counties from Iowa, we don't get to see that all the time. So it's good things to put in the memory bank for sure. So good stuff. Thanks, Jesse. Scott, he already kind of called you out. So let's go there, and I'll let you give an update.
Well, as far as the probably seeing similar to what Jesse was talking about on insect wise in beans, armyworms and podworms. They're not done by any means, but they're not widespread. So we're definitely continuing to sweep fields and keep an eye out for them. Also, as Jesse said, a lot of our recommendations are centering around the products like Besiege that add another mode of action, particularly on the armyworms, but also on the podworms. A little more residual that way, and definitely more efficacy. I guess the watch out that I would have for our folks up in the central region is I don't know that the podworm situation is so much hit and miss. I think it's really correlated to where the beans are. I know we've had an outbreak in up around Norburn, which is kind of northern, quite a bit further north than we see them a lot of times. But as I got to talking to a manager up there, the beans in particular, they were planted late May, 1st of June, and they're, like a 4.6. So it's not so much that it's that little geographical pocket. It happens to be a geographical pocket with a longer maturity bean planted a little later, and they're just still very susceptible to the damage. So double crops, anything else that's that kind of fits that template that I just laid out. Those are the ones that we probably really need to keep an eye on. And we do have a lot of later beans. Now if they're a shorter maturity, we get past the solstice and things kind of move along pretty fast regardless. But if you've got that bean that is a mid 4, like a lot of our double crops will be, just to take advantage of the season that we have left, they could still be susceptible. So be aware of that. As far as disease goes, just echo what everybody else, said as far as southern rust. Definitely seeing differences between, we can find it about everywhere now, but definitely, when it started, when it really took off, in many cases did correlate to where fungicide was used and not used. And the other thing about that, we've talked about it, I think before this year. Everybody came in really thinking tar spot, and keep your powder dry, and let's wait to R2, R3, and all of a sudden it's tar spot is we can find a lot of it too, but it's southern rust is what you really see when you pull that leaf. So there's something, a little bit of a lesson in that maybe is have a plan, work the plan, try not to second guess things too much, because we just don't know, particularly on these new diseases. Speaking of, they did finally, we thought we had some corn stunt up in Central a few weeks back, ended up testing negative. I think that it was actually sent to another lab to be checked in, maybe with a different test, but then they did confirm one at the university lab this past week. I believe it was down in Morgan County. So, that's kind of a little bit of a late season thing that fortunately it does not seem to be a widespread problem, but did show up again this year. The big one really for us in the past couple of weeks was just the red crown rot being found all over. I shouldn't say all over the state, but, last year it was in Marion County, kind of made sense, just across the river from where it's been a problem, for several years in Illinois. This year it also showed up in Marion County, but then it showed up in a couple counties on down south of Jeff City, which really kind of threw us off. And then it's also been found in Lincoln County, and then one of my folks found it in Audrain County a couple weeks ago. And, I'll just give a little bit of, when we went up and looked at the field last year in Marion County, all I had to have was directions to the field, and I pulled up. I see, big area out there, and it's pretty easy to walk out to. This field in Audrain County,
Cheyenne gave me the directions to the field, and I still had to call her back and have her basically walk me exactly to the spot. I mean, it was kind of a needle in a haystack kind of deal. So it's not, big, huge areas. It was very subtle and just a couple plants that kind of exhibited those, using quotes, the SDS like look on the, as far as the foliage went, on the leaves. And the boy, when you pulled the plants, it was obvious you were looking at red crown rot. So we've been really mindful, especially in that area now, of digging in on any SDS that we have. But so far we've just, it's been SDS in most cases. So I'm sure there's others out and around. There just have to be. I mean, I can't believe that we found the one small spot out in the backside of a field, half mile off the road. As far as anything else, I'll just not to turn this into the fertilizer podcast, but just to echo what the other guys have said. If somebody approaches you this year about doing some grid sampling, excuse me, about the NutriTrack program, anything like that, I probably ought to stay in my lane, I guess, but prior to doing what I'm doing, I did that for 15, 20 years and have been through some ups and downs, fertilizer price wise and commodity price wise and all that. And I guess I would just tell you, do not be concerned. I'm gonna get on my field sample and then they're going to say, oh, it calls for a pile of this. And, just regardless of what's going on, write the check, put it on. That is not how we use that. It is just we know that there are going to be cuts. I mean, we get it. There's also going to probably be some shifts as to which commodity you cut. I mean, right now, phosphate looks very strong. There may be an opportunity to if you have a field that has some stronger P numbers, but we pulled the potash down, maybe that's where we focus. But it is, at least the way I always approached it, it was very prescriptive. It was field by field and maybe even nutrient by nutrient as to what we cut. It is not blanket. It is not, I think the worst thing you can do is say, man, everything's up X percent. I'm going to shave it by X percent. Let's get the information for the value of the fertilizer. Getting samples done is very, very cost effective. Find out where we're at, find out where maybe we need to do something completely different on some fields, adjust, look at pH. But you got to get the information first. It is, I won't beat it to death. We got to get the information and then we can pick a number and we can take off where we need to take it off. Taking into effect, account all of those things and even, how long you're going to have the ground. I mean, all those kind of things. I mean, I took all that and I got really pretty nosy when I sat down with my guys to try to figure out where to spend their dollars. Because I always try to say I want to handle it like I'd handle it myself. And the only way I can do that is if I know kind of the ins and outs. But the starting point is to make sure we have those figures. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, it's good stuff, Scott. It's just making an informed decision versus a blind decision. So absolutely, it makes sense. And yeah, we've got to have candid conversations from a retailer standpoint and from a customer standpoint. I mean, you go into a car dealership and if they don't know what your budget is, they may try to sell you the brand new Lexus model and your employment, you work at McDonald's, right? That maybe doesn't fit. Okay. So you've got to have that conversation about where your budget is, what you want to spend. And then, yeah, take that and make an informed decision from it. I think that's absolutely fair. I mean, that's absolutely fair. So good stuff. All right, Shannon, I'll let you round out the crew here this morning.
Yeah. So the nice thing about going last is a lot of things that I was going to talk about have already been said. Just to kind of before moving on a little bit farther, going into the soil sample a little bit more, I always think of, our soil levels being like a bank account, and that soil test alone will pay for itself so quick, especially in a year like this where fertilizer prices are high. Maybe it's as simple as fixing pH. Not always, but sometimes it is. As Scott said,
we can tailor those things field by field, acre by acre. Not everyone's operations are the same. So, and some areas, I'm in one of those areas. Poultry is big. Do we start looking at alternatives? Can we mix and match some things? And that's exactly what the NutriTrack program is for. It's for guiding those decisions and helping get what is needed for next year's crop in the places that it needs to be. So, absolutely here to be partners and do whatever we can to help through these tough situations. Moving into the crop update, corn. Our first crop corn, we started harvest. We call it early corn early, 9,500 day maturities, planted early, March time frame. They started harvest about a week and a half ago. They've been rolling in southern Cherokee County. Most everything else is still a few days away. I know some guys tried late last week. We're still high. We don't have a lot of dryers, so most of the time that crop's got to dry down in the field. I was going to say probably this weekend be going strong, but there's quite a bit of rain in the forecast this week, so it kind of depends on what that forecast looks like. But I could say Labor Day will probably be running pretty hard. Corn diseases this year, Southern rust was our big one. Obviously, I think it's been a big one for everyone. That the early corn that got the fungicide, the fungicide did its job, like Jesse said, but it has broke here in the last few weeks. It's came on strong again. And we just had the perfect growing conditions. We don't normally have as much moisture as we do late in the summer, and we've just had the perfect conditions for southern rust, and it's just continued to blow up. Gray leaf spot was another one that we had quite a bit of this year. That showed up early and is even continuing to show up. And it all goes back to, I think we've talked about it quite a bit today, so I'm not going to be a dead horse, but hybrid selection plays a big role in that. And not necessarily that we're going to know every disease that's going to show up every year, but just being mindful when we are planting those packages, which ones do need a fungicide no matter what? Which ones do you think we can maybe set back and wait and see what the season looks like? Making those plans early, so when we go through the season, we execute on those. Soybeans, we're having a little bit different, I think. Sounds like the podworms are kind of spotty for you guys. For us, the podworms seem to be everywhere. In the last week and a half or so, they've really blown up. Not so much the armyworms, but the podworms have. So making decisions there to spray, kind of doing similar to what Scott's doing. We're leading with Besiege, Elevis, Vanticor, those type products that give you that longer residual that really help with lepidopters. The challenge has been, especially on these double crop beans, is not wanting to pull the trigger too early. We preach all the time we want to be on that R3 time frame, but some of the conversations we've had this last week, we may be R2, but if we have a bunch of worms out there that are doing damage, we can't wait. We're gonna limit yield right there out the gate, and we might as well just go ahead and do the trigger. We're really better off pulling the trigger a little early than wait until that perfect time frame, because by then it may not even be worth the spray by then if you're over economic threshold like we have been. So we've saw one of our salespersons over in Lamar. He was sweeping last week and he was getting 20 or 30 worms per sweep. Like it was just awful, and it's just one of those things you just got to pull the trigger and just go. We understand, we preach that R3 is the perfect time, but sometimes you got to deviate from the plan, which is why we're out there looking.
Good stuff, Shannon. Yeah, the insect pressure in soybeans is definitely been ramping up. I know we made some comments earlier when a lot of fungicide and stuff was going on that we weren't seeing a crazy amount of stuff, but I know, like I said, we did a plot walk on Friday, and there was quite a few stink bugs that you could pretty easily find. We even found a whole mess of them just in the nymph stage that had just hatched. That was pretty interesting. Good thing to show staff and growers there, but yeah, stay out there, keep looking. Like I said, even if you make a decision to not pull the trigger, it still teaches you something. So, gentlemen, thank you for all the updates for sure. Anybody else have anything that they wanted to call out that didn't get talked about this morning? Okay. Not seeing anything. I appreciate you guys all taking time this morning to record this. Appreciate everybody taking the time to listen. And next episode should be in a couple weeks. We'll kind of challenge these guys with a little bit of a season recap and get us started into 2026, which we are steaming towards at full speed, it seems like. But anyway, thanks everybody for listening again, and we'll talk to you next episode.
Thank you for listening to Made for Agriculture, brought to you by MFA, your whole farm solution.